I love football.
Desire, hungry, and a lot of times I use the word horny to my players.
Because I said, when we make clean sheet, I pay to everybody a pizza.
No, you have to make a decision in relation to that, because I need to know from you what is the most important thing, if it is to play well or if it is to win matches.
We've shown wonderful character this week.
Back of the net.
This is episode 2 of Back of the Net. We're on here with you, and we have James Fenton joining us once again. James, it's actually been a while since we recorded, because we recorded the last episode kind of in the middle of December. So it's been more than a month now. Plenty's gone on. A few managerial changes, a couple of international tournaments going on. So I think we've both been busy watching a lot of football in the new year.
Yeah. Christmas was a busy one, and it's kind of continued into January as well. International tournaments, Premier League, Women's Super League, everything going on. Just the only thing missing is League of Ireland. Yeah,
League of Ireland's coming back soon, and both the men's and the women's league starting in March, and we will have Pelham back, our weekly women's Irish football show, returning at the end of February, and we'll soon have a men's Irish football show coming before the next international break in the men's game. And if you want to listen to a bit of talk about women's football, we have our women's football magazine show that has come out. That comes out every the first Friday of every month. That went up there, Vanishing Foam Monthly. That's up on Spotify. You can search Cost Plus Sport. But all about the men's football here. Plenty of stuff to talk about. I think we're going to start with the Afcon and the Asian Cup. The two big stories. We'll get on to managerial changes, Jurgen Klopp's announcement. I think the Afcon this year, it's really captured a lot of people's imagination, because it's been kind of a roller coaster. It's almost a bit like, it reminds me a bit of Euro 2016, a few upsets, a few Ivory Coast reminding me of Portugal in that tournament I was looking at. They were probably favourites to come out of their group, but they only just about went through as the fourth-ranked, third-place team. I was looking at, there were a couple of games where if I think Ghana and a few other teams had scored, Ghana and Zambia had scored one more goal in one of their games, then they would have gone through. Morocco, I think, were a lot of people's favourites. They got eliminated. Senegal out, and now we ended up with quarterfinals that were completely different to the quarterfinals in the last Afcon. And obviously we're recording this before the semi-finals, so it's Nigeria, South Africa, Ivory Coast, DR Congo. You might be listening to this by the time those results have been set, but it's been a really open tournament. It's been a really exciting one. Not thanks in the least to Ivory Coast, who've had plenty of drama.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Ivory Coast. It's always good to follow the host nation in tournaments like this, and they've had plenty of ups and downs, including scraping through the group, like you mentioned, and sacking their manager in the middle of it, and they've managed to get through the knockout stages all the way to the semi-final by a couple of extra times. So yeah, that's keeping a lot of people's interest. Obviously, the underdogs as well, Cape Verde and things like that. South Africa haven't done much in quite a few years, so to see them in the semi-final is an interesting one as well.
Yeah, South Africa haven't actually been at the World Cup since they hosted it, and they weren't overly. They were the first World Cup hosts to get eliminated in the group stage. The men's, anyway. Ivory Coast, has a team ever won an international tournament, sacking their manager midway through the tournament? I don't think that's ever happened before.
It's one to look up, all right. Nothing springs to mind, but yeah, it's definitely a bold move. I would have thought. The assistant is taken over, I think, so at least there's some familiarity there.
It's kind of a bit like Chelsea in, was it 2012, the men's Champions League? I think they had about 3 managers that season. They went on to win it. In that final, they somehow conspired to win, or Bayern somehow conspired to lose. But it was it's sometimes it's just so crazy it might just work. I mean, why wait till the end of the tournament when you're eliminated to sack your manager? You may as well make a change. But it's just quite a hectic thing. But I don't think anyone really anticipated. They came from behind against Senegal, very late winner against Mali. One thing to say is they're going to be without 2 of their players now against DR Congo, so that'll obviously have an impact on them. But yeah, it's been a very exciting one. And Cape Verde, you mentioned League of Ireland there. Obviously, Pico Lopez plays for them, Shamrock Rovers, so he's doing the League of Ireland very proud. Just about eliminated against South Africa on penalties. 2-1. You don't see many 2-1 penalty shootouts.
No, definitely not. I was watching that penalty shootout live, and there was a couple of bad ones. All right, the South African keeper was it run something Williams. He was brilliant. Stayed four out of the five penalties, so he was pretty much unstoppable. But yeah, a lot of people in Ireland have been keeping up with the results because of Pico Lopez, I think, and they've provided quite a story.
Speaking of Ireland, Ivory Coast obviously are flag twins, the inverse of our flag. So we have to. I suppose we kind of have to support them. But I call Nigeria favourites from here. Granted, the way this Afcon is going, I wouldn't really put any kind of prediction on it. But they probably have the most quality in terms of star power in this team. They probably have the most quality.
Yeah, they've people like Victor Osimhen, like one of the best players in Europe at the moment. They've got a lot of quality throughout their team. Ivory Coast also got plenty of good players in their squad, and they have the backing of the home crowd. So I would say I'd agree with you on that. Nigeria are the favourites, but I just think that when a host nation gets to the semi-finals, there's often a sense of destiny.
I feel like the finals is going to be really exciting anyway, based on the rest of the tournament. Because, like, in fairness, there weren't certainly in the knockouts there weren't any hammerings, which is good. We see that in the Euros. We saw it in the Women's World Cup. There weren't a lot of hammerings, but you get the odd big scoreline. Looking through the group stage results, there's the odd game that's kind of 4-0, couple of 3-0s. In fairness, I don't think there were two. There was no group that kind of had more than one hammering, more than one 4-0 result like that. So I think it's good when a tournament's kind of close like that. We see it in the Euros sometimes. I mean, we see it in every tournament. We see it in the World Cup. We see it everywhere, men and women's sport. It's I think a complaint about the Rugby World Cup last year was a lot of the group stage matches were heavily one-sided, and it's like, look, it's you don't want to not give countries an opportunity, but it can kind of feel a little bit pointless if every match is being won by a large margin. So in fairness, yeah, I'm looking at the knockouts here. Only one game was won by more than a 2-goal margin in the knockout round. So in fairness, I think that's lended to the quality. Obviously, there'll be more African teams at the next Men's World Cup in 2026. Been announced that the opening game will be in Mexico. And it looks like if Cape Verde, if South Africa, if one of them qualify, it looks like they'll at least be able to be a bit competitive, which is good. Because one thing about this expanded World Cup, we will obviously talk more about that after the rest of the international tournaments this year. One thing about it is we might see a lot of very one-sided games. We might see a lot of group stage games that are like 3, 4, 5-0s, and it's great for smaller nations to be at tournaments, but at the same time, it can dilute the quality. So I suppose it's that balancing act of kind of trying to make the tournament appealing, and I think it's helped the Afcon that in fairness, we haven't seen loads of hammerings like we maybe see in qualifiers sometimes.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there's a wider point there. Like the gaps in international football have been kind of closing for quite some time. The likes of Iceland kind of made headlines in 2016. Like they kind of came out of nowhere to get to the quarterfinal of Euro 2016. World Cup last year, the likes of Japan taking on Germany and Spain, and then this Afcon you mentioned Cape Verde and teams like that, Mauritania. So if they do go to a World Cup, they can with the look of the draw, they can have ambitions of racking up a few points and maybe squeezing into the knockout stage.
At the end of the day, like different teams have different goals. Some teams just getting to a World Cup is great, but like you want them to at least be able to throw a punch. One thing we see in the Asian qualifiers a lot is quite one-sided games. Like we see, you can see games nearly or even reach double figures. Again, not too many hammerings. I mean, I can't say I've been able to watch a lot of the Asian Cup, but a good story that came out of that Tajikistan in their first ever major tournament in their first ever Asian Cup. Certainly, anyway. I don't know if they maybe played in a smaller tournament, but making the quarterfinals, very narrowly lost out to Jordan in the end. In the quarterfinals, who just today, as we're recording, beat South Korea in the semi-finals. So Tajikistan, in fairness, they offered plenty of drama. I mean, they got through they got through their last 16 on penalties, and I was looking at the group stages. They really they were on the verge of finishing bottom of the group, or getting eliminated anyway. They were 1-0 down, 80th minute equalizer, 92nd minute winner against Lebanon. That basically got them through. Those were their first two goals in the Asian Cup, because they had drawn their first game 0-0 against China, lost 1-0 to Qatar. So like yeah, pretty exciting things. I say. I don't know what they drink pints of in Tajikistan, but I'd say their goal scorers won't have to buy one for themselves anyway. You have a nice connection to South Korea, so I'd say you were disappointed with how things went in the semi final against Jordan. Bit of a shock.
Yeah, the Taeguk Warriors. I'm a bit of a fan, having lived there for a few years. So haven't been able to watch too much of it over here, but I have been following the results. Their campaign is played out in front of a tetchy enough football public there. So Jurgen Klinsmann's the manager, and there's a perception that because he hasn't moved to the country and anything like that, he's not that committed, and they're not too happy with his tactics. They feel like he's just a big name manager. But they managed to get through the group with a win and 2 draws. And then in the knockout stage, they just got past Saudi Arabia on penalties, and that was a late equalizer they got there, and then they got another late equalizer against Australia. So they've managed to galvanize themselves somehow, but they came unstuck against the underdog Jordan today. So South Korea now have to live with the fact that their long wait for an Asian Cup that goes back a few decades will be going on.
Nearly won the 2002 Men's World Cup. In fairness, in a different world, it could have been Ireland, South Korea in a World Cup. I think quarterfinal or semi-final. I'm not sure when we would have meet them, but in fairness, yeah, it's an interesting one when you have bringing a big name in can kind of it can do great to paper over cracks. It can seem like you're kind of it can seem like a progressive move. It can seem like a really good move, but sometimes you wonder, are these managers just kind of using these jobs as stepping stones, as kind of placeholders until their next big job? Jurgen Klinsmann, is he just kind of waiting to get back to a big European job? It's just a paycheck for them. So like maybe sometimes it works the other way. We're going to obviously talk about managerial changes later, but maybe sometimes like we had in Ireland, we had Trapattoni, and obviously got to a Euros, ended up as I think one of the worst ever performers in a Euro Championships. And we would, in fairness, we would have at the time it seemed like, wow, this is great, we're getting a big name, but it doesn't always. It's like they don't always connect with the national team. I mean, I think Trapattoni once obviously said there's no league in Ireland, and there is a League of Ireland, of course, that will be starting next month. But it's kind of like they don't always connect with the fan base. They don't always connect with the players. Sometimes maybe either they feel, or maybe it's unintentional, but they come across as like thinking they're too big for the job. Maybe.
Yeah, when you're an outsider, you have to be very careful with your words and make sure that you don't make disrespectful comments like Trapattoni did with that League of Ireland comment. Klinsmann, yeah, he just from an outsider looking in, he seems, his big jobs have been in international football. He galvanized Germany, got them to the World Cup semi-final as hosts. That kind of kicked off the Yogi Love era. Then with the United States, he took them on a good run in 2014, and kind of had a backing of the football public there. So he's just kind of been jet setting around, taking international jobs, and he seems to like that lifestyle. You can stay at home in California and watch his players play for their clubs from afar, and it just sometimes international football supporters want to see a little bit more commitment from their managers.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, because obviously, it's one thing with a club, it can be maybe easier to come in and pretend, pretend it's, as one of our former strikers said, it was your boyhood club and you always dreamed of playing. But I suppose if you go to a national team that's not your own country, I think it can kind of be like, well, why is this guy here? What connection does he have to us? Obviously, club teams have players from all over the world. Football's very globalized now, so it can be easier maybe to make a connection with club team fans because you're more used to people who aren't from your country or aren't from your city. We're long past the days where club teams are made up of local players. But when you're coming into an international team, I mean, I know Ireland are obviously looking for a manager after Stephen Kenny not having his contract renewed. So like I think a lot of Irish fans would like a manager who either has a connection to Ireland, has played for Ireland, or was from Ireland. I think that was the idea of giving Stephen Kenny the job. He coached in the League of Ireland, and he obviously was Irish. So, you kind of had to do more to win over the fans. It seems like in international football, then club football. Obviously, if the results don't go the right way, club football can turn very nasty. But at the end of the day, in international football, it's kind of like, well, who's this guy coming into our? What does he know about our football? Especially when it's someone with seemingly no connection to the country. So it can be a challenge at that point of view. And yeah, like you said, you have to be very careful with kind of what you say and the way the way you kind of interact with the fans, the way you interact with the players, the way you respond to questions in the media.
Definitely, yeah. The culture to every national team is important to the fans, and I think the least they want is the manager that respects that. Like you said, it's a lot easier to kind of, if you're in the day to day and you've got home games every week, it's easier to connect with a fan base, I suppose, if you're coming from outside the country or region. But yeah, it's like so Klinsmann's getting a lot of stick this evening online for allegedly smirking after the full-time whistle when South Korea lost to Jordan there. So, it seems that the Korean fans have had their fill of him for now.
Yeah, probably time to get someone new in for the next World Cup. Iran, another good story. Obviously, a lot of talk about them in the World Cup. Very much, it seemed like the players were very much taking a lot of civil rights issues into their own hands. Big win against favourites Japan in the quarterfinals, and we're recording just before they play Qatar, but it'll either be Iran or Qatar in the final. Qatar, of course, hosts. And obviously another story. Look, we're not a political podcast, but Palestine, all the horrors that are going on there, really good showing for them. I mean, I obviously football is not as important as a genocide going on, but it's really it's an inspiring thing to see these Palestine players be able to go out there and perform when there's I guess I don't know what the word is, distractions. There's so many other more serious things going on. So I think you have to give credit to them as well.
100%. Like, who was it that said football is the most important of the non-important things? The Palestine team was not a great story. I don't think they made it through to the knockouts, unless I'm mistaken.
They made it through to the last 16.
They made it through to the last 16. Yeah, it's a great story. Obviously, particularly everything that's going on with their people, and like a lot of their families, I guess, are affected. We saw it last year with Iran in the World Cup, in 2022. There's a lot of stuff going on for them back home, and there's a lot of attention on them when they weren't singing their national anthem and things like that. And it's the kind of thing that people can really get behind a team when these kind of things are happening.
Yeah, and I think it's a very important thing to a lot of Irish people as well. So I think they certainly have a lot of support here. Looking in terms of like you said, it's the most important, the least important things. But back to the football, then there's obviously a lot going on in terms of managerial changes. So we have Jurgen Klopp announcing he's going to be leaving Liverpool at the end of the season. Brazil have a new international coach in Dorival Junior, and Jose Mourinho has left Roma. So we're going to talk about those three things mainly. But I suppose we'll start with Klopp. It's the big news in football, in going around in European football anyway. look, he's built quite a legacy. He's obviously, I mean, look, obviously Liverpool have had amazing managers before the Premier League era, but probably in the Premier League era, he's must be their most successful manager. Won basically everything aside from the lower tier European trophies. Well, you Liverpool fans will remember that Europa League final. They were leading against Sevilla, one of Sevilla's many Europa League wins. I'm sure, as a Man United fan, you're not too sorry to see the back of Klopp.
No, I wouldn't say I am. At the same time, you have to have a lot of respect for what he's done there. He took a lot of people forget that just over a year before he arrived, they almost won the league, but that following season, they really fell down, and then the start of the next season, it was time for Brendan Rodgers to go, and Klopp was left with a squad that had been, they lost the likes of Luis Suarez and Raheem Sterling and these kind of players that were so good in 2013-14. Like he said himself, it will take 3 or 4 years to win the league, and I think it took about 4.5 in the end. But yeah, he's won everything there is to win. And he's the way he connected with the fan base. I think it was the perfect match at the perfect time between Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool. There's just something about him that was very Liverpool, I think, and he was able to use that and get everyone behind him quite early, and most importantly, get them to trust him. Even those first few seasons when they were slowly closing in on Man City or whatever, and the Champions League finals. So yeah, he's been brilliant for the league, and who knows what he'll do next. There's talk of the Germany job. He says himself he'll take a year out or so. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he ends up.
It's probably happening a year too late for a German point of view. They probably would have loved to have him for a home Euros, but like he was very honest in his interview, saying he probably just needs a break. He's tired. I think he said he has no energy. So he's very much it's time, and it's a sensible thing to do to step away. But yeah, like when we think about it, I mean, when we think about how dominant Man City have been in the league, I mean, Liverpool obviously broke up their run of they had won 2 consecutive Premier Leagues. I mean, without Klopp, Man City probably win 6 in a row, and the only time that's something similar has happened is when Manchester United they had won, I think, 5 and 7 seasons, and the 2 seasons they lost it was on goal difference to Man City and by 1 point to Chelsea.
Yeah.
So like it was no one's ever won more than 3 English Premier Leagues in a row. So it's quite what City have done, and obviously through a bit of financial help, and we'll probably hear something about the allegations about the financial allegations later. But like Liverpool winning the league that season, in fairness, I remember Jurgen Klopp said something when he was Dortmund coach. He said something along the lines of Dortmund have a bow and arrow, and if they're very precise and their aim is very good, they might be able to do something. Bayern Munich have a bazooka, and the fact that he was able to break up Bayern winning the league, and he's still the last coach to win a Bundesliga that wasn't managing Bayern, might change this year. But the fact he was able to break up Bayern dominance and break up Man City dominance, we probably take for granted how good of a coach he is. So it'll be a transitional period. But yeah, like you said, I mean, Liverpool. I mean, I was looking at the first starting lineup he had in his first game for Liverpool. I mean, it was basically a mid-table team. I mean, it certainly was a far cry from what they have now, and what he's been able to do has been really, really excellent. So the natural successor seems like someone like Xabi Alonso, who's over coaching Leverkusen. They're top of the league at the time of recording, might break up 11 years of Bayern dominance. So that seems like a good one. Probably just anyone but Steven Gerrard would be a good fit.
Yeah. Xabi Alonso has done wonderful things the last couple of years with Bayer Leverkusen. Still unbeaten this season, I think, in the league anyway. And he will certainly be high on the list of for Liverpool when they're looking for Jurgen Klopp's successor. I'm not 100% sure if it's not a little bit premature. I think there's a lot of focus on Liverpool from fan point of view and media point of view. It's a massive, massive job, and he might be wise to just wait and hold on and see what else comes up maybe in 2 or 3 years, because there's every chance that the next Liverpool manager is the David Moyes for Liverpool, and can't quite live up to expectations, and has to take one for the club as a whole. Steven Gerrard, if it was a couple of years ago, yeah, he would have been up there as well. But I think what he did at Aston Villa was dreadful, and some of the choices he's made in his career haven't been good since. And yeah, I think he kind of blew it by leaving Rangers a bit too early. If his final ambition was to manage Liverpool, which we think it was.
Yeah, definitely. And when I look at it, on the other end of it, I agree it might be too early, and he probably won't have instant success next season, or maybe he has the new manager bounce and then goes into the natural kind of slump that happens. But one thing I'd say is, if they're looking for a long-term successor rather than a transitional successor, so I mean, it'd be the kind of thing like, do you get a big name in to transition this season, maybe on a 2-year contract, maybe, and then bring in Xabi Alonso, or you bring Xabi Alonso straight in? You say, right, look, we're not expecting miracles in the first season. Champions League is going to have an extra place, so it's easier to get into in theory. It's probably going to have an extra place for the English clubs, an extra automatic one. So, maybe you give him that season, let him bed in his style, let him bed in his players, let him learn the job. Let him do that, and as well from his point of view, that Leverkusen team is probably going to get dismantled in the transfer window over the summer. I mean, like the likes of Palacios and all, their star players are going to be snapped up by Bayern, Real Madrid, bigger budget teams. It seems like Bayern Munich signing kind of anyone who's doing particularly well in the Bundesliga. Dortmund might even sign some of them. So, is he going to be able to maintain success there? At Leverkusen if he stays, and then will suddenly have a worse reputation. So it's kind of that balancing act of, yeah, it's probably too soon to be overly successful, but would in the long term it be better? But then again, you could argue if he stays at Leverkusen despite losing loads of players, manages to rebuild, manages success there, then maybe that sets him up better. So it's a difficult one, and it's probably, to be honest, I always think with these kind of things, it's kind of a, they say football's a results business, so it probably just depends on what, like, if they hire someone new and they win the league next season, then yeah, great appointment. If they hire someone new and they don't make Champions League, then it's like, no, terrible appointment. So often the results will justify these things. But I do think Xabi Alonso's done very well. You mentioned David Moyes there. I think it would be really funny if David Moyes took over. Just the fact that he's come in after Alex Ferguson and Man United, and now he's coming in after Klopp at Liverpool. It would be, I mean, he's done a great job at West Ham. I mean, so, he'd probably be more qualified to take over for Liverpool as he was when he took over at Man United. He's actually won trophies, in fairness. But like, it would be in terms of entertainment value, in terms of like a very funny option, like Moyes takes over at Liverpool. Imagine that first game between Liverpool and Man United at Anfield or at Old Trafford when Moyes taking over. That's, I mean, in terms of like what you want to see a Netflix documentary made out of. We've seen a lot of documentaries made. Look, there's obviously one being made now at Klopp's final season. We've seen Tottenham, we've seen Arsenal. I mean, that's one you can make a documentary about. Moyes takes over Liverpool, having done so badly at Manchester United, been infamously badly, and now that entertainment wise, if that's one thing I'd love to see. Just not because I think it's a good idea, just because whatever happens is going to be really entertaining.
Yeah, well, certainly would be a funny choice. And he has the Everton connection as well, so that's something else. But yeah, not sure if they're going to go down that road, but he has been. I think he's been brilliant for West Ham, and I think he's done a very underrated job there. And
I mean, you won a
uh,
European trophy with West Ham. That
yeah,
was unthinkable 10
mm,
years ago, I think.
exactly. And he got to the Europa League semi-final the year before. They've had three and a bit ish really solid seasons in the Premier League, and losing some big players, and he seems to have really settled there. After he was settled at Everton, went to United, and he kind of hopped around for a while. So yeah, he's restored his reputation, I would say, definitely.
I think we need David Moyes in the league, kind of good
Mm.
managers at teams like higher mid table. Everton were a pretty good team when he was managing. Obviously, it hasn't been going great in recent seasons. West Ham, he's made into a higher mid-table team that teams don't particularly enjoy playing against and might just go on a run somewhere and win something. I think we need Moyes types managers. They're not fit for maybe jobs like Manchester United. Obviously, I'm being tongue in cheek saying he'll take over at Liverpool, but it would be really entertaining if he did. But he's not. He's not for those big clubs. We need those kind of underdog managers who are good at the clubs that are just a step below the kind of superstar elite, the Super League clubs, if you like.
Yeah, yeah. The likes of Thomas Frank, I suppose, and De Zerbi, they'll probably have higher ambitions than where they're at now. But you definitely need those kind of guys. Really, really talented managers working on smaller budgets, and credit to them. A lot of them have been battling away there against the big boys for quite some time. And Brentford, obviously, they've stepped a little bit this season. But Thomas Frank has done an amazing job there, kind of establishing them in the Premier League.
Thomas Frank, Roberto De Zerbi, they're two names that probably will be. I mean, like you said, they have probably these are only their early jobs in the Premier League. They probably will have ambitions for eventually managing a club like Liverpool, Chelsea, and Manchester United. Um, they probably will have clubs like that. Again, it's kind of that issue of if they take over at Liverpool. It's always interesting. It's kind of like a sink or swim thing because Graham Potter was doing really well at Chelsea. Then he takes out, or sorry, Graham Potter was doing really well at Brighton, and then he takes over at Chelsea and it doesn't go well. He hasn't suddenly turned into a bad manager. It's just maybe sometimes the job isn't right. Sometimes it's a particular team. Sometimes it's not even about the level. It's just the players available. It's it's the type of style play the fans are expecting. But in fairness, like they're probably two managers that will be in the talks, as will Unai Emery, who's done a very good job at Aston Villa. And I know it didn't go great at Arsenal, but again, in terms of clubs that step under, I mean, you won a European trophy with Villarreal, who I think are about the size of Bray, County Wicklow, where we're from. It's managers like that. It's always an interesting one. If they take the next, are they better off staying where they are? Because if they take the next job up, are they suddenly going to be out of debt? Is it kind of like they're the perfect fit for the level they're at now? Clubs that are just below the elite that could just win something, could qualify for Europe, could go on a run, decent Europa League run, rather than taking over a big club and going out in the group stage of the Champions League and suddenly it's a disaster.
Yeah, I think Graham Potter is the perfect example of that. I think he took that Chelsea job way too soon. Became available, and then within 2 or 3 days, I think he was at Stamford Bridge, without seemingly, having put too much thought into it. Brighton had started off that season brilliantly, and Chelsea obviously wanted to go for, the kind of flash in the pan type manager, not the Graham's a flash in the pan, but he was a man of the moment, and he would have been better off, I think, staying with Brighton because he would still be there now, and we may not have seen Roberto De Zerbi in the Premier League just yet if he had done so.
And that's like we could see it like it's obviously Ten Hag still in charge of Manchester United. There's no news of imminent replacement. They seem to have recovered a bit of form every couple of weeks. It seems Man United are back, Man United are gone again. That seems to be the trend since Moyes left, and they've had Louis Van Gaal, they've had Solskjaer, they've had Mourinho. But it seems like Ten Hag, I mean, doing a good job at Ajax again. Probably a team that's always punched above their weight because they're always losing players, and there suddenly is on a team that from the point of view of he used to be punching above his weight. Now he needs to be he needs to be reaching an even higher level than
Mm.
the level he was achieving at the smaller club when he was overachieving isn't enough for the
Yeah.
club he's at now. And there's been times that hasn't been good. Maybe it'll end up, maybe it'll end up like an Alex Ferguson thing, and the first few seasons don't go great, but then suddenly suddenly things transform. It seems like though that's never going to happen again. We're never going to have that Alex Ferguson thing of they're given kind of 5 seasons to bed in a style of play. It seems like an instant success is what most teams kind of want now. Like, and sometimes to the detriment. I mean, I remember once. I mean, I think Sean Dyche did a great job at Burnley, and in fairness, they got relegated one season. They kept him, got promoted again, and eventually they ended up playing in Europe. So sometimes, I mean, even if things aren't going great, it is better to stick with someone. But it's an interesting one. Just whenever these managers step up, Ten Hag at Ajax, you could argue Moyes. Obviously, Moyes had been at Everton a very long time. But these De Zerbis, the Unai Emerys, the Thomas Franks, if they do step up, is it going to be a very natural fit and they're just great, or is it going to be kind of okay? Well, now all of a sudden they're exposed and it doesn't look good. And I think I agree with you, Graham Potter. It was kind of like when you come home tired after work, you feel like I should quit my job, and you see a LinkedIn ad for a new job, and you're like, yeah, I can do that. But it's maybe applied on LinkedIn, I don't know. But obviously, another manager is free, and I'm talking purely from entertainment value, not for long term success. Liverpool, Jose Mourinho, make it happen.
There's a lot of non-Liverpool fans that would love to see that happen, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
Liverpool fans probably wouldn't enjoy it, but in terms
yeah.
of entertainment from I mean, my English team are Charlton Athletic, nowhere near the Premier League. From non-Premier League fan point of view, or even
Mm.
Premier League lower teams point of view, Jose Mourinho at Liverpool. Imagine he comes in, he signs a load of 30-year-old players, has amazing success, like wins the league, wins Europa League, wins something like that, and then the next season, just imagine the scenes when it all goes wrong, and then they get in Xabi Alonso.
Yeah, he could be. Yeah, that could be a clever move by Liverpool, to be honest. They hire Mourinho as a fall guy, and then as Alonso gains a little bit more experience. But yeah, whether we see Josie back, whether we see Josie at Liverpool, I'm not so sure. But he does seem to have a bit of a graft for the Premier League, so he'll be looking at any openings that may be coming up, maybe
So
even at a place that he knows quite well in London.
maybe, yeah, there might be a job in London coming up. Like Pochettino for Chelsea, it seemed like Pochettino seemed like it's almost a Moyes thing again. He's doing a good job at Tottenham, hasn't won anything, takes over a PSG, he literally won the Super Cup on like his first game or something like that. Again, if you don't win the Champions League with PSG, you're a failure. You're expected to win domestic trophies. And it seems like that kind of thing again. He was a good manager for a team where the expectations are lower, but then takes over a bigger team and suddenly, or a team with more expectations. And in fairness, Chelsea just seems like a bit of I mean, how much have they spent on players, particularly in the same position? But like it just seems like everything about the ownership model and the transfer model seems to not be great. I don't think they've been helped with injuries. But again, it seems like a very natural fit. But on Jose Mourinho, he's left Roma now. Again, like it all started so well, won the Europa Conference League. Maybe if he had won the Europa League last season, things would have gone better. Obviously, they only lost on penalties. It was it's always drama with Mourinho, but in fairness, like it seemed like the right kind of thing. It was that siege mentality, us against the world. We're a smaller team. We don't have the budget of any of these bigger teams. We're punched above our weight. It seemed like something was building, but then this season it just went wrong. And you wonder with Mourinho, is he better suited to jobs like that where it's like, well, if he doesn't win the league, sure, yeah, you'd hardly win the league with Roma, like, but is he better suited to jobs like that than jobs like, obviously I'm joking saying he's going to take over Liverpool, but jobs like a top team that's expected to win the league, is he better off? Is he nearly the inverse? He's a top manager who's better off taking a club just below the elite level because there's less pressure. He can galvanize the fans, no matter what. It seems to end toxic anyway. So he may as well do that rather than go to a really top club, not win anything. Obviously, he's won things in most clubs. I think all clubs he's been with basically. Like you look at what he did at Porto. I mean, no one expected Porto to win the Champions League. I don't think anyone expected Inter to win a treble when they did. And then those jobs just tend to suit him better, weird in a weird way then when he returns to Chelsea, wins a league, and then it all falls apart and he gets into a fight with the physio.
Yeah, you make a good point there. Jose Mourinho is very good at creating the siege mentality, particularly at the clubs that are maybe a little bit below the elite, like Roma, like Porto. Inter Milan, I guess, they were kind of below the European elite when he came in there. He becomes the story. He takes the story away from the players. He enjoys that, and I'm sure the players enjoy it. But the Jose Mourinho of the mid 2000s to the mid 2010s is very different to the Jose Mourinho of later years. He's a very different operator. He's a very different, whether it's the rivals have caught up with him, but the arrogance and the confidence and the just sheer self belief he used to display is now, it's a little bit faded. And he kind of does have to accept jobs like Roma, which I think he might have thought was beneath him maybe a decade ago. So he would be good at, I guess if he came in at maybe a Newcastle, that could be one. At Chelsea, I know a few of the fans were chanting his name the other day, so they might welcome him back. And I guess they are kind of an underdog these days since he's left.
Yeah, I suppose maybe he's better off taking a team that's not on a high, kind of, so he can create that siege mentality. I like what you said about taking the heat off the players. I mean, everyone's looking at Mourinho, no one's looking at the players, so maybe that suits some players. Another just an international team that got a new manager at the start of January is Brazil. So Dorival Jr. taking over. Never played internationally for Brazil, but played a lot throughout Brazil and Latin America. Managed a good few. He's been managing since 2002. Pretty much always in Brazil. Won a couple of Libertadores with Flamengo in 2022. So has that bit of success. Most recently won a Copa de Brazil with his last club, Sao Paulo. So in fairness, looking at it, I'm not going to test to know a lot about him. Looking at his recent record since kind of 2015, he seems like a pretty solid coach. He had 2 spells at Sao Paulo, 2 spells at Flamengo. So, he was he seemed to have been welcomed back at least. Kind of maybe unassuming type of appointment that might just work. Obviously knows Brazilian football because he's looking at his match exclusively in Brazil. I'm looking at this Brazil team and thinking, could we maybe be on for not quite the heights of 2002, not quite the same quality, but when I look at international football, France are the only team that really stand out as a great team, a team that could have like what Spain had between 2008 and 2012, that kind of era of dominance. Obviously, France, they won. They won the World Cup 2018, made the Euro final 2 years prior. Disappointed themselves at the Euros in 2020/21. And then, a World Cup final that they only lost on penalties to an Argentina team that I think it was their destiny to win that World Cup. So, and then there were reports that there was COVID in the France camp in the build-up, which probably didn't help. So, maybe it's a chance to this Brazil team. I look at their quality. I mean, Rodrigo and Junior of Real Madrid up front, Magalhaes and Marquinhos as centre backs. They're probably few players just past their best, like Casemiro and Fabinho, who were in those crucial midfield destroyer roles. But when I think back to 2014, they were so reliant on Neymar, so reliant on he was kind of one of the only players in that team you'd really particularly recognize at times, unless you were a real student of the game. And I remember they were like without a striker. They didn't really. It was pretty much the Neymar show, to even more of an extent of Argentina being reliant on Messi. I mean, because Argentina had more quality around them. They have 2 of the best goalkeepers in the world. They're 2 of the I'd actually in a lot of ways compare Brazil to Ireland because 3 world-class goalkeepers, 3 very good goalkeepers in Alisson, Ederson, and Weverton. Obviously, we have Bazunu, Kelleher, and Travers. Obviously, I'd call it about equal. I mean, I'd say if you add it all up, it's about equal. But obviously, just Brazil team, they have a lot of quality in them. So could we see the Copa America is going to be really interesting. There's going to be 6 CONCACAF teams, CONMEBOL and CONCACAF have signed an agreement. So they're going to be like how CONMEBOL have signed an agreement with Europe to work together. So there's going to be it's kind of a cross-border competition that's happening in the USA. It's going to be an interesting one. I mean, that would be a start, but it seems like in Brazil, winning World Cups is where you really make a name. And that 2014 was so disappointing. But now it's like if they had this team in 2014, they could have won that World Cup.
Yeah, yeah. Like you said, that really was the Neymar show. Even when he got injured in the quarterfinal, and the nation was up in arms over that ahead of the semi-final, which they ended up losing 7-1 to Germany. So um, I think they put a lot of their eggs in the Neymar basket. But yeah, it's been a long time since they really made a mark on a World Cup. Even 2014, they stumbled their way through a little bit. But yeah, they do have a lot of good young players coming into a good age in 2026. Vinicius Junior, like you said, Marquinhos, even
Douglas Luiz
Richarlison.
and Bruno Ramirez would be another 2 I'd put in
Yeah,
there.
Richarlison does very well with the yellow shirt on. So yeah, I'm not sure if the new coach could be an inspired appointment. Knows Brazilian football very well. He's not that big a name internationally. So there's not going to be the added media glare if it was like an Ancelotti, for example. So yeah, it feels like they could be well placed in 2026. If they get there, because they're a little. The results haven't been great so far, I don't think, but they usually get there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, well, they always seem
They
to.
always get
I
there.
mean,
Yeah.
in fairness, there's an extra automatic place for the South American teams now, so I think
Mm.
it would it would be the opposite of a miracle if they didn't make it. It would take something to that extent. But we're looking at yeah, I'm just looking at that Brazil team and I'm impressed with what I see. Looking ahead then, European football returns. Well, European competition returns. Obviously, there is still football in Europe, but we'll have the Champions League, Europa League, and Conference League knockout rounds. Just in case there's any confusion about the Europa League and Europa Conference Leagues, this is the knockout round playoffs. So the teams that topped the Europa League and the Europa Conference League groups respectively go to the round of 16. Teams that finish second play in the playoff rounds against the team that dropped down from the competition above. So Europa League second place teams play a Champions League team that dropped third place team, and Europa Conference League teams play against a Europa League drop down team. I think that's as far as I know with the new format. Not 100% sure if this has been decided yet, but what I've heard is anyway they're either getting rid of or thinking of getting rid of the drop down. So no more teams going from Champions League to Europa League, no more teams going from Europa League to Conference League. Not 100% if that's been confirmed or if that was just a kind of proposal. But I think that's a really bad idea myself because there's a lot of teams who are kind of not at the level of qualifying from the group of Champions League or Europa League, but can make a good run the competition below. So personally, I think that's a really bad idea. But looking ahead to the knockout rounds, it's this is kind of the end of the era for European football because obviously so much is changing next year.
Yeah, yeah. This is the last knockout round of the current format in the Champions League. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how the changes are received next year in the new group format or league format, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see that.
Looking at the round of 16, um, I mean, I'm looking at the ties here: Porto, Arsenal, Napoli, Barcelona, Paris Saint-Germain, Real Sociedad, Inter Milan against Atletico Madrid, PSV against Borussia Dortmund, Lazio against Bayern Munich, Copenhagen against Manchester City, RB Leipzig against Real Madrid. I mean, it's the kind of thing. There's potential shocks, but there's no two big heavyweights going at it. Real Sociedad are my pick for maybe pulling off a shock because they have quite a good team, very understated team. They're doing well in La Liga. They've made the latter stages of the Copa del Rey, and I just feel like this PSG team a lot of young players and they seem very get atable. They seem like you can just get at them. PSG as well seem to be cursed in the Champions League, destined to never win it, which isn't a bad thing. But that's my pick for a shock. Do you see many shocks coming up in this last 16, or will it be pretty much as expected?
No, it's quite a bland looking last 16 to be honest. I would go with Real Sociedad. They've been very impressive this season, and PSG, as Newcastle showed, can often be there for the taking. If you're looking for a big shock or not quite a shock, but a tie that could be closer than you expect, Copenhagen were very impressive in the group stage, and they've got a home tie against Man City, home leg against Man City first. So I wouldn't really expect Man City to come away with, like, say, a 3-0 win, or like many might expect. I think that they might come back to Manchester with a job to do if Copenhagen play to the best of their ability. But I'm
And that
not
can make
in saying that. I'm not saying Copenhagen are going to knock out Man City.
that can make all the difference in the title race if Man
Mm,
City beat Copenhagen. I think they beat Leipzig 7-0 or something in one of the legs of of last year's Champions League. They were quite dominant throughout the tournament. If they have a job to do in the second leg, they might have to rest players in the Premier League, and that makes a difference in terms of the title race. Same could be said for
mm,
Bayern Munich. I mean, I don't think they'll have too much problem with Lazio, but if the first leg away from home doesn't go great, then suddenly they might have to do a bit of rotation in the league. Could lead to dropping points, and then suddenly, and then they'll probably have no problem in the second leg. But ultimately, that might have a knock-on effect on the league games. Inter Atletico Madrid is probably one tie that stands out just in terms of two fairly decent teams playing each other. I think that'll be a fairly good one. Probably a bit of SH1T housery, as we call it.
yeah.
Bit of you know what housery, but Atletico, they I wonder, is Diego Simeone, is he coming to the end of his time at Atletico? I just have that sense. He's another one. I wonder what he could do with a bigger team with more budget, more star power. He's really punched above his weight with Atletico Madrid at times. Obviously, they're not a poor club. They're quite a wealthy club. They were one of the Super League clubs. But in terms of breaking up that Barcelona, Real Madrid dominance, that was quite an impressive thing to do. So I always wonder what he could do, maybe in another league. And another one that maybe stands out is Napoli, Barcelona. Victor Osimhen has confirmed he's going to be leaving Napoli at the end of the season. He seems to be Real Madrid's third choice after Mbappe or Haaland, who might be hard to get. He's linked with a couple of Premier League clubs. So he's a quality striker, and he's probably going to score goals wherever he goes. But it might be one of these kind of examples of a striker doing really well at a club where the expectations aren't quite as high, and then, like we said with the managers, going to a club where still you're expected to score two or three every week, and that doesn't happen. And how does that have a knock on his confidence? But there are a couple of interesting narratives anyway. Trout and PSV, I
Mm.
think, deserve a mention because they've been quite good in they're unbeaten in the Eredivisie. They've been quite good. They have quite a lot of they're kind of playing the Ajax role this
Mm.
season, which their fans might not thank me for saying, but they're kind of that team full of young players that no one really expects to do well, that might just do well. And that Borussia Dortmund team, they're prone to a slip up, they're prone to a lapse, and
Mm.
I think that might be another one. So there's a couple of different stories going on.
Yeah, yeah. I think PSV have only dropped 4 points. They've won 18 and drawn 2 in the Dutch league, so they're really on the crest of a wave. And probably Dortmund would have been one of the teams that they were happy to come up against in the round of 16, from all the top seeds. So yeah, that would actually be an interesting enough game, I would say. And a place in the quarterfinal at stake, and who knows what can happen from there.
Then looking at the other European competitions, Europa League, Feyenoord Roma, a repeat of not particularly good first ever Europa Conference League final as it's now known. Milan, Rennes, Lens, Freiburg, Young Boys Sporting, Benfica, Toulouse, Braga, Karabag, Galatasaray, Sparta Prague, Shakhtar Donetsk, Marseille. I mean, this is a fairly open round again, like because no, maybe Milan aside, who aren't obviously the team that would have been in the 2000s, but probably definitely the biggest name there, but probably them and Benfica, the teams with the highest expectations here. But fairly open round, and then you come into the round of 16, and from there, some of the bigger teams from the group stage come in. Um, obviously a couple of English clubs, a couple of Spanish clubs,
Yeah,
but just a fairly open one in the Europa League and Conference League again. Fairly open draw. Ajax probably the biggest traditional name there. Real Betis might have expectations. So I always like keeping an eye on the Europa League and Europa Cup. Sometimes they just end up being a bit more entertaining. The games
yeah,
end up being kind of that, rather than a 1-1 or a 2-1, you get a 4-3, which is always good. So sometimes I suppose it might be two teams going for a European trophy that have never won one or haven't won one this century or may never get the opportunity again. So it's that kind of, there's always a good story there, and it's always good to see these kind of, don't want to say lesser, but lower level European clubs who are maybe very good in their league, but wouldn't make it in the Champions League, and that's why I like the Conference League. It just gives teams another chance to kind of have a European run and maybe even win a European trophy.
yeah, 100%. The Europa League is, I would say, it's quite a prestigious competition. Like, not everyone can win the Champions League. Only 6 or 7 clubs that generally can. So to take home a European trophy is something that shouldn't be sniffed at. And from an Irish point of view, these clubs in the Europa League, we have a bit of interest to see who's going to be playing in the final in Dublin in May. Liverpool would be the people's choice, I think, for most Irish people. But AC Milan are in there as well, and a couple of other big clubs. So yeah, it'll be good to see what two teams are paired up at the Aviva Stadium in May.
Yeah, Liverpool AC Milan final at the Aviva
Mhm.
Stadium. That sounds good. Liverpool, really, really, it's like there's three English teams that could well have a run in this Europa League in Liverpool, Brighton, and West Ham. I know a few West Ham supporters around Ireland. Obviously, Liverpool are well supported. Not sure how many Brighton supporters are in Ireland, but there'll certainly be a lot of support in terms of it's just a hop across the Irish Sea for them. So yeah,
Mhm.
it'll there will be, and obviously as well, like our teams, like realistically it would be very difficult to get an Irish team in the Champions League even with four extra places, really two only two available for us. So the Europa League, Europa Conference League, we're all teams have different aims, and just getting into a group stage of a European competition can be quite a heroic feat for a League of Ireland side. So I think it kind of captures Irish people's imagination a little bit because they'll be familiar with a lot of these teams obviously as well from early qualifier rounds,
Yeah.
teams that we may well come up against. So and I'm not going to attest to know the maths about the coefficient who needs to win what to make an Irish team progress to maybe the second qualifying round. But I know there are people who work these things out, and they're doing the Lord's work for football fans, the people who can work
Yeah.
these things out.
Oh yeah. I wouldn't be that inclined to sit down for a few hours with my pen and paper and figure that out. But yeah, I am thankful for everyone that does.
Yeah, coefficient mathematics.
Mhm.
But yeah, looking at it's going to be a good week. It's going to be a good year, a good month, I should say, of European football anyway, and then we'll wait and see what happens. Just one more thing that kind of came up in January is players looking to leave Saudi Arabia. Obviously, Jordan Henderson gone to Ajax. There's talk about transfers between Newcastle and Saudi Arabia to allow Newcastle seemingly to overcome certain financial fair play restrictions. So, it seems like the bubble's kind of burst in Saudi Arabia, and players are just I don't I'd like if it, like it seems like it's not going to become the superpower league that some had anticipated.
No, it hasn't taken long for the bubble to burst. It was only last summer where the major influx of players started, and quite a few of them have either left or are intending to leave. With big tax bills in their in their back pocket. So yeah, it hasn't gone to plan for the Saudi football authorities, Saudi Arabia as a country, or the Saudi league.
Yeah, it just hasn't really worked out for them. I mean, I think Benzema's looking at leaving. I think pretty much most of the big names that signed are looking at leaving. One thing we didn't get to talk about and that we might talk about next time is let's talk about domestic cups. Like is there the magic there? Is there the appeal there? I guess like the lower league European teams, they might be an opportunity for teams that aren't going to win the league to win a trophy. But I was looking at, I mean, there were a few good stories around Europe and domestic cups. I always love watching the French, not watching but keeping an eye on the French Cup because the old colonialism comes into play, and you get teams from the Caribbean, the Pacific, coming over to play in France. You get some teams traveling to Pacific Islands to play against French lower league teams. So it's always an interesting one to hear about the geographical information. Anyway, the old graphs on the maps. But we're going to touch on that later. But on the next episode that'll come out in March. And the other thing I want to put to listeners, and James, you can have a think about. You have a month to think about this question. All right. Just thinking about coming off the transfer window, I'm thinking about what team would be most successful if they hadn't have sold their players that they developed, not necessarily came through the youth system. So the teams I'm thinking of is obviously Ajax. A lot of great players came through their youth system. Would they have maybe won a Champions League? Dortmund, obviously there was a time they had Lewandowski, Aubameyang. They had Mario Götze in his prime when he was before he was the tree, back when he was the dog, as he said himself. Atletico Madrid, another big one. I mean, they tend to have a pretty good goalkeeper coming through the ranks. So a lot of teams that if they hadn't have. And obviously, look, this is a hypothetical, and we're not getting into, well, if they sold this player, they got the money to buy this player. We're not getting into that. Just fantasy booking here, fantasy teams. If they hadn't have sold their players that they either bought young, came through the youth academy, developed young. If they hadn't have sold them, who would have the best team? So that's one to have a think about anyway. Yeah. We tried to put something together on our blog about it a while ago. I don't think it really. I don't think it really came to fruition. But Karim Benzema obviously came through at Lyon, and they're a team that's had a habit of producing good young players. It's funny, we were kind of talking about it last time around, and just to touch on briefly, there are a lot of leagues, like the Eredivisie, the Portuguese league, the Belgian league, even, that produced a lot of good players, and you just wonder if they're able to hold on to half of them. How successful would those clubs be in European competitions?
Yeah. There's some of the clubs you mentioned there have great tradition of bringing players through, Dortmund, Ajax, that kind of thing. Yeah. So the story of European football history could be quite different if they had managed to hang on to some of their players. So it's definitely one to think about.
Yeah, and Rodri Hernandez, Rodri at Man City, one of the best, probably in my view, the best defensive midfielder in the world at the moment. Atletico Madrid could still have him. So that there's a bit of fantasy football transfers kind of thing going on. So you can let us know your thoughts on that, and remember to get in touch with us with anything you want us to talk about, any questions you have, or just your opinions on anything we talked about, anything you want us to talk about. It's at PostBusSport on Twitter/X, whatever you want to call it, and on Instagram as well. And postbus.sport.blog, going to be updating our website, postbus.sport.blog, towards the end of the month. Still a bit of a work in progress, so go back to that one. Remember, if you have interest in World Women's Football, we had our episode of Vanishing Foam Monthly up a few days ago, so that's on our Spotify as well. You can hear we were looking ahead to the Olympic qualifiers, the CONCACAF Gold Cup, a bit of transfer talk, and a bit of talk about German football woes in the Women's Champions League. Pell and Back, our Irish women's football show, returns on February 22nd. So we're talking about the domestic game here, the Irish women's senior international side, and Irish players abroad. So that'll be coming up, and still a work in progress, but we're planning on bringing in a regular Irish men's football show that will be kind of either side of the international breaks, talking about the Men's League of Ireland, domestic football, maybe Irish players playing abroad, and obviously the Irish international side. Not sure who's going to be taking over, so keep an eye out for all that. Make sure you subscribe to us on Spotify. You'll never miss an episode, and we're thinking about uploading our podcast to a few other platforms, so keep an eye on that. James just mentioned the League of Ireland there. I'm sure you're really looking forward to the men's league and the women's league starting again.
Yeah, can't wait. Only a couple of weeks to go, so yeah, really looking forward to it.
We'll hopefully chat to you on our men's Irish football show when it gets up and running about well, there's always something to talk about in the League of Ireland. Hashtag greatest league in the world. There's never who was it that said one normal week of Premier League? That's all I ask. That's kind of the way it is in the League of Ireland, it seems sometimes.
Oh yeah. It's much more entertaining than any of our Premier Leagues, I think.
yeah. Well, it's I guess instead of watching football's football. Instead of watching billionaires run around, you're watching, people who you're watching people who are just good at football, playing a bit of football, and like we say, there are obviously levels to it there. None of these players are probably going to be playing for Real Madrid anytime soon, but it's always entertaining and it's always good football. So looking forward to that getting started. Thanks very much for joining us, James. Hope you
No problem.
Hope you have a good. I hope you enjoyed your extra bank holiday for St. Bridget's Day. Did you say thanks to St. Bridget?
Of course I did. Yeah.
Did you make a Bridget's cross?
Haven't got around to it yet. Hopefully later in the week.
Okay. Well, hopefully you can. Yeah. I think you have the week to make one, so it's okay. That's actually maybe an issue for primary schools now with St. Bridget's Day offering a bank holiday. There are less days to make Bridget's crosses in primary schools. That might be a bit of an issue. And of course, in advance, happy Valentine's Day.
Thanks very much. Happy
Valentine's Day. I think football is going to be my Valentine this year. But you might get in trouble for saying that, obviously, because you're married. So thanks very much for listening. Back in the next episode on the first Tuesday of each month. Spotify ++ Sport, and enjoy the football.